It doesn't
Let's
need
do
to.
that. We're going to see the socks on YouTube. So, okay, what do we got today?
Okay, so these are fun ones.
Yeah, they're
And
always fun ones.
well, I don't know. Sometimes they're not as fun. I actually really like these ones, even though it's not my hobby, right? So I'll show you. This one is like bass fishing,
Oh, there
and I
you
think it's
go.
fly fishing.
It is.
And
It
like
looks like it could be.
I don't know anything about it actually, but these ones I thought I saw these and I was like, well, these are fun.
My
Uh,
youngest son is actually mm, yeah, like he's a guide, and he's actually known in the fly fishing circles. So like if you ever decide to take that up, I will connect you. So yeah,
oh, for
like
real?
yeah, like he invented a tool to make fly. I mean, like he really is, like he's got a podcast on it. So yeah,
For
so
real?
yeah, I'm not kidding. So yeah, he was one of the first people to start fly fishing off of a paddleboard. So I'm not kidding. So yeah. So this
Fascinating.
is not a BS meter thing. This is a
I
truth.
am not sure if I could ever really get into fly fishing. Like I've fished a few times and it's fine, but like no, I need something else in my life. But
I'm more with you, like the bicycle and like yeah, active, like yeah. I mean, yeah. So that is more me. But for
yeah,
those that do it, it's very zen. My husband is very good. Like they like that. I go like, can't we talk? Can't we walk around? Can't we do it? So yeah. Anyway.
yeah, no, I can see that it could be very zen.
Mhm. So, what do you have for us today?
So you're not jumping into he usually has a spiel that he reads. You're not going to
Oh,
read the
all
spiel?
right. That well, you can introduce yourself because I don't do that. Like you know me good enough. So the spiel is welcome everyone. So glad, and I said this before you got on, but there are more of you now. Thank you for joining us today on Friday afternoon. So Matt Wheeler is here today. He and Debbie McCrae work at Family Strategies in Mesa, Arizona. So if you're in Arizona, they're great people to see. But they alternate on the Fridays, and Scott and I are with them, and we had a little schedule stuff. So I'm here today, and which is always a delight. Thank you for being here. Matt's going to talk about I don't know what yet, and then but
Yes.
if you have questions about that or anything else relationship oriented, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and he will answer them all because he can do that. So yeah, so
I will answer them all because I can do that. So to introduce myself, I'm Matt Wheeler. I have been practicing a little over 10 years now. I'm trained in emotionally focused couples therapy. I'm also a certified sex addiction therapist. And so yeah, I love the attachment work. I love helping people connect. And the past couple of webinars, uh, I've tried giving like, so what I try and one of the things I've been trying to teach people to do on the webinar as well as elsewhere is to learn to hear the attachment bid that's coming from our partner. And learning to hear the attachment bid is really, really tough, especially when they're doing something that's painful. And I mean, if you think about like even I'm trying to think of a good example. Like if my child's yelling at me, Dad, you aren't paying attention and you're always on your phone or whatever. Like I might feel criticized, right? That I'm being told I'm a bad father or that I'm not showing up the way that my kid needs. But if I can hear the attachment bid is my child saying, Dad, I need you. You aren't showing up the way that I'm needing you to. But the truth is, I say child because we tend to be, as a culture, more patient when a child is screaming and upset. It always depends on the age of the child. But if you think about like a baby crying, most of us are like, oh, what's going on? How can I help? How can I soothe this baby? Like we have an understanding when the needs of a child or a baby, an infant comes up. Now, as a child gets older and those needs become uh, honestly more and more present, but then the child learns more and more negative coping strategies. We might think that the child is entitled. We might think the child is throwing a tantrum or a fit. And some of those things might be true, but the truth is our needs don't go away as we get older. In fact, I think our needs often get more defined. They get more specific. I think our needs get more almost fine-tuned. And so the problem is that our skill set for letting people know that our needs are coming up usually don't get any better with age. We end up often throwing the same type of tantrums that we threw when we were a kid, or we protest the lack of engagement the same way. And so I've been throwing out this idea like, hey, if you guys are struggling to see how your partner is protesting the lack of attachment, send me a scenario like in the question, and let's try and explore together what the attachment bid actually looks like. And it's not going, like, you might hear me go through it telling you about the attachment bid and you might think I'm making an excuse. I'm not doing that at all, because the reality of it is, if we can call out the attachment bid but not rush to solve it, and in fact let our partner become aware of the bid, we can actually encourage them, is there another way you would like to ask for this need? I'm actually willing, if this is the need that's coming up for you, I'm willing to explore that, but I can't engage when it's presented in this way. But what that's doing is it's giving us an opportunity to offer a gracious assumption to our partner. And in addition to that, make them aware that they have a need, and make them aware that I want to help them meet their needs. And the truth is that I want them to help me meet my needs. Like, that's just a healthy relationship. So we could do that. Questions that are like, hey, where are you struggling to see your attachment bids from your partner? So we can explore that. Obviously, you can ask whatever questions you want about recovery, about addiction, about human connection. If you're wondering how to connect better and you're struggling to figure out why you're getting blocked, you can throw those questions out there. We can explore that. I love those as well. So lots of different options. But Tammy, any thoughts so far?
Well, I like the gracious assumption. Like, that was, I mean, that because I was like, oh, I'm making a gracious. I like that language. I think any of this that we put in, like, if we can look at it from from that lens of like, okay, how can we step into this? I've talked to, unfortunately, this has been a tough week for betrayed partners, where many of them are getting shut down by the addict. Like, that person is not, like, they're putting out their basic relational needs, like really for their safety. It's nothing extravagant, over the top, and they're getting shut down. And these people are in active addiction. So it's like one of those where, like, it's just really challenging to see a path forward, when somebody is immediately shutting down, like stopping you. Like you said, we all have needs, and they're more defined, even more refined, but they're still basic human needs.
And it's always been intriguing to me, and we can go into this more, how I will get a betrayed partner, and generally betrayed partners generally are healthier, if that makes sense. And they will get down to, I just need you to put your hand on my back and tell me you love me, right? And they're like, I can't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the betrayed partner is sitting there going, how simple do I need to make it, right? And
you're so demanding. You want everything, like, I'm asking for this,
I feel so sad for the betrayed partner who is like, I am literally asking you for the most simplistic thing, and you're telling me I'm demanding. Now, if we look at that, for instance, it's going to sound odd, but the attachment bid from "you're so demanding" is really them saying, I wish I could show up for you, but I feel so inadequate that, and I'm so scared of being criticized that if I do that wrong, that I'm going to be seen as a failure, right? And I mean, that's one gracious assumption there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if you're a betrayed partner, you're like, oh, seriously? Like, if you were to hear them even say that, it's like, all I'm asking for you is to show up for me in a very simple way. Why does it need to be about your shame and that you're a failure, that you're not going to be able to do it right? And it's sad because both are true. Like, the betrayed partner really just needs some very basic, minimal connection. And the person struggling with addiction, it is so, they have so much shame, so much of their own pain getting in the way that they're not showing up for the betrayed partner. Super painful.
And yeah, and it'll be, you're so demanding, you're so needy. I hear that one too. Like you're so needy.
That one drives me crazy, because as if it would be like saying to somebody, you're asking for water, you're so thirsty. And it's like, yeah, that's what our bodies do. They get thirsty when we don't get our needs met, right? Like when we don't get enough water, when we don't get enough hydration, right? And as if that's a negative thing, right? It would be like saying to somebody who has sight, you see so many colors, right? It's like, yes, I do. That's kind of how the eyeballs work. Yes, you are needy, and that's wonderful. In fact, the more needy you become, the more wonderful and beautiful that is, because really, the more needy we become, the more aware of our needs are, the more aware of what our needs are, and the more capable, if you will, that we are of being able to get those met, because awareness brings the ability to get it met. The other one I hear is, you just want attention. And that one bugs me in particular, because I'm like, yes, that is actually a core need, is attention, to be tended to be nurtured. Yep, we all need nurture. We all need to be tended to. We all need attention. That's actually a really healthy need. And so we shame these needs. We shame the idea that somebody's needy. And really what we're saying is, I feel inadequate, but I'm not healthy enough or knowledgeable enough to tell you that your needs leave me feeling inadequate. And the truth is, my needs, because I am so inadequate in a lot of areas of how to show up for people, anybody's needs make me feel inadequate. Unless I happen to be really good at something in particular, like going to work and being a salesperson. Well, then I'm great taking care of people's needs there.
Well, and it's always, that's the facade too. I can be great with all these people out there, but the people that I'm close to, I hear often, and this has been a particular theme again this week, of I'm afraid to talk to the addict about this because he or she, and I've had both, will be triggered. Oh, they won't do that. I mean, it's like they will, like, that there will be a shutdown process. Right. And so there's fear on behalf of the partner just to ask for basic little, human healthy needs.
I've been actually teaching that one a lot this week, the last couple of weeks. People will often say to me, like, oh, I want to talk to my partner about this issue with money or sex or whatever it might be, right? And then I will say to them, and this is a wonderful question, and I think I've talked about it many times on here before, but the wonderful question is, oh, well, why don't you talk to them? Well, I'm afraid they're going to shut down. Well, have you told them that? Well, no, if I tell them I'm afraid they're going to shut down, then they're going to be upset at me for not having any confidence in them. And then I'm like, oh, well, have you shared that with them? Right. And you always get down to this place that usually at the core is, I love my partner and I want to be close to them. And I'm nervous that having any conversation is going to drive them away. So then I'll say to them, tell them that I love you. I want to be close to you. and there's things I'd like to talk to you about, but I'm scared that you might feel like I'm criticizing you, or I'm scared that you might feel like I'm upset and it drives you away, when what I really want is for you to pull me close. And so start there. Start at, again, I know we kind of talked about that. Start as deep as you can to say, what I want is to be close to you. What I need is for you to pull me close. And or what I need from you is just to stay present and not run away. And it doesn't mean that your partner is going to be able to do it, but rather than bring up a topic that is really like a flashpoint, deep down underneath that flashpoint is the desire to be close. And so start talking about the desire to connect, the desire for your basic attachment need.
So let's play that out. And if in a perfect world, the person would respond positively and go, I want that too, and I
Right.
want to work on building that.
Right.
What happens if they go, you're so needy, you're so demanding, you're so whatever,
Right.
like when now you've gotten down to this core
Right.
thing and you still get shut down.
Right. And so my response is, you're right. I am needy because I need you. And I am demanding because there's nobody I want to be closer to than you. And so you're right. I am needy. I am demanding. And I think it's a beautiful thing because it shows how much I value our relationship and our connection. And I'm sad that my needs seem to cause you pain. Because what I'm doing there is owning that it's okay for me to have needs, owning that I want to be close to you, and owning that it makes me sad that my needs bring up pain for you. And so I'm also not owning that my needs are the problem here. The problem here is your pain and your inability to show up for me and my needs. So I'm in a very loving way handing the problem back to you, because the problem isn't my needs. The problem isn't me being demanding. The problem is your inability to show up for me in that. But I'm not saying it by saying you're the problem. I'm saying I'm sad that my needs bring up so much pain and make you want to disconnect. So that there I'm pointing out the cycle or the pattern as it's happening, rather than pointing to my partner and saying, you're the problem, not me.
And I hear often too that, like it escalates and, like then there's the fight and it's the same fight over and over and over again. So I appreciate that you're laying it out in a different way, and not having the partner, presumably the partner's, going with that, not taking ownership that I'm the problem. It's like your behavior is the problem, your inability to disconnect, and I'm owning that I'm sad about that, and inviting change.
A mistake that too many betrayed partners will make is, oh, well, you're opening up to me and you're telling me that my needs are the problem. Okay, let me try to change my needs, restrict them so that you'll be more willing to open up to me. Because the person struggling with addiction is often, they don't understand why. And so they just point the finger thinking, well, that seems to be the problem because you're requesting it and it causes me a problem. And so obviously this is the problem. It's like, no, it's not. The problem is my inability as an addicted spouse to understand myself well enough to say, I want to show up for you, but those needs sound too scary for me. I don't want to be a failure by trying and have it not work. So I'll just, in a way, push you away. Well, a betrayed partner, in an effort to try and relieve the load, will often try and take ownership. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You're right. I'm too needy. That's the worst thing you can do, because it sends the message that they're right. My problems are the issue. When the betrayed partner from an attachment standpoint is trying to say, this is where Prodependence jumps in here. The betrayed partner from an attachment standpoint is saying, I love you and want to be close to you. And without realizing it, I'm going to take on an unhealthy behavior just to try and attach. And the unhealthy behavior is that I'm going to own that my needs are the problem, right? So what we want to learn is that my desire to take away the problem is beautiful. If I actually do take away the problem and put it on me, I'm becoming over accountable and setting up a scenario for the addicted spouse to continue to blame me, right? And I'm reinforcing it. And so I have to learn to own what's mine and let them own what's theirs, but not even by pointing the finger, just by saying, it makes me sad that my needs seem to be too much for you or cause you so much pain.
So we have some questions. My essay husband seems to put in the least amount of effort to get a task done. Often it is just simple issues like keeping the home clean. Then I discover the task only gets done halfway and ask him to take it to the next level to have it completed. It appears he seems to wait for me to discover that it's not completed and then ask for it again. It makes me feel like a nag and feels inadequate that he can never please me. And I think I'd love if I could just discover that he showed up and took care of the issue. His lack of follow through undermines my trust in him.
Totally. The interesting thing about this is I can see this playing out. You ask him to do something. In his mind, he's like, okay, well, I better go do it. I don't want to disappoint her, but he doesn't really want to do it. And so he does it halfway. And then you find out and say to him, let's see, I'm trying to make sure I'm catching up here. You say to him, hey, it's not done the way I want it. I need you to do it better. That's where you feel like a nag. And that's where his shame comes in. And then maybe you're like, you know what? I just struggle because I feel like if you would just do things the right way when I ask you, I would feel so loved. And so I don't know why you don't do this. Like, it makes me question if you even really love me. Then he goes into his shame more. And then you tell him that if he would just do it the right way, there'd be more trust. Again, cycle, spiral. So I may be getting it totally wrong for you specifically, but I think a lot of people could relate to what I said as far as how that spiral tends to work. Really, if you were to access the emotions that come up for you, you're most likely feeling some disappointment and some sadness. And what I would try to do in this case is when I discover it only got, well, one, I'd actually, before I give a task, meaning after this workshop, not workshop, what do we call this? Webinar. After this webinar, if he's not watching with you, I'd go to him and say, hey, I have noticed what I would see to be a pattern. And I'd really like to understand why this pattern happens for us. There are times where I've asked you to do certain things, like a chore around the house. So maybe I asked you to do the laundry. And what I would say is, I'm not sure I have totally known this, and I'm not sure if you've known this, but sometimes I've asked you to do a chore just to see if I matter to you. Now, if that's not entirely correct, don't say it. I've asked you to do a chore, and when you don't do the chore the way that I was expecting you to, I question whether or not I matter to you. I'm wondering, when you do a chore for me and you like, why do you do the chore? Are you just worried about getting in trouble? So you do the chore so that you don't get in trouble? Or do you do the chore? Is you doing the chore? That's not even English. When you do the chore, does it have anything to do with your love for me? Because I want you to recognize that in all of what you wrote, unless I'm wrong, for you, it has something to do with trust. For you, it has something to do with a measure of love. I would spend some time to figure out, husband, what does it mean to you? To me, it means trust. To me, it means a measure of love. Are acts of service to you anything to do with love? And he might be like, no, like, No, I do it so I don't get in trouble. So it's not about love, it's about fear. Huh. If I said to you that you could increase your love and your trust for me by doing a chore in a certain way, would that make a difference to you? What if it's not about fear? What if it was about realizing you could fill up your trust level for me or your love tank for me? Would that change how you do it? And I'm asking these questions not to change him, but to actually figure out, how does he see the world? And could, if you start talking about it, could he see how you see the world? And if he could, and you guys could recognize that you just are different, could your behaviors change together? So
And
that
I'm
you're no
curious.
longer a nag. Does that, if
I'm
that makes sense?
It does, but I'm also curious, is it across the board, like with work tasks, with friend tasks, with other things, is it always half? And like in the 12 step, we
Right.
talk about half measures, because that would be a place of vulnerability to me, is like, well, he does this 100% if it's, if it's perceived as something he wants to do, or
Right.
it's for work or something like that. Or is it across the board? I would be very curious to know if there's, if there's a difference in where he shows up. And I don't know what the answer to that is. So
No, to be honest, I think what I love about it is this is a scenario that you could spend a lot of time getting curious with, right? Like, if he's that way everywhere, well, then it doesn't have anything to do with love and trust. Does that make sense? If
mhm.
he's full bore and he never misses a task and he does it all the way when it's at work, okay. So what is it about work that you can do it amazing? And is that because you love work more than me, or is that because that's where you get your self-worth from, which isn't necessarily healthy, right? But and so you do it full bore there because you actually get some type of um self-worth boost. Whereas if you were to do it with me, you don't get a self-worth boost. For some reason, you don't get self-worth by me telling you, you're such a good boy, you did such a great job, right? Because maybe he's putting himself in a child role and you are in a parent role on accident. Really, all you're doing is saying to your partner, hey, I need help. I don't want to be alone in the tasks that we share in the housework, which who would want to be? And so anyway, lots there to kind of explore and discover.
Yeah, and everybody does things differently, and we all have our different levels of different things. It may be, if there's something where this is how we, clean a toilet. I don't know, but like, this is what I'm expecting, so that there's guidance, that this is the ultimate, of what I'm, the expectation at the completion of the task. This is what I'm expecting. If there's clarity. I did learn, this was a long time ago, because we lived on a multi-story house, and I had a laundry basket. Our washer and dryer was in the basement, and my husband and daughter both, could squish around and not take the laundry basket down. And I was like, how can you walked right by it, I'm not the maid, and they're like, we didn't see it. And I learned finally that they really did not see it. So I had to learn to ask, and so
Right.
my expectations, I had to learn to verbalize exactly what I was learning. And then I had a lot better experience. It was, and should I have to do that? Heck no. But I learned, for me, I could either do everything myself, or I could learn to verbalize exactly what I'm looking for, and see if they could step into that space. So that
It,
was helpful for me.
oh, it's intriguing to me with all the people that I work with, how often I'll run into people who they'll say, you know what, I just didn't see the laundry basket. And the funny part is, if you take them at face value, right, and believe them, you often can be better off, right? Like, I am intrigued at how many people that is how they exist, that they literally don't see it. What they saw was an object of them getting in the way of them going down the stairs. And so for them, it's just like, oh, there's this object there, I'm going to go around, right? They don't think, like, for instance, and I think this is comes with like spending so much time on the trails, but like when I see a piece of garbage on the ground, I honestly see it, pick it up, put it in my bag or my pocket or whatever, and throw it away at the next place I can throw it away at. Like, that's how my brain thinks. I do not want trash on the trails. But I think so many people, they don't even think that way. And it's not that they're bad people. There's nothing wrong with them. They're normal, good people who just don't see a piece of trash and think I should pick it up. So when we start to recognize that our spouses, right, every single one of us has little things like that. If I tell people all the time, if you were to spend time with me in real life, there would be lots of things that I'd drive you crazy with. In fact, I mean, to tell a funny story, this may sound funny to Tammy because it involves her. When I did my CSAT training, Tammy would be like, Matt, get off your computer, right? Like, pay attention, right? And she would always tell me about that. Well, I've since learned a lot of things that, like, because of the way my brain, like, believe it or not, ADHD, like, there are so many times I can listen better if I have some other little engagement going on. I can stay more focused. And it's like, I don't totally know what it is, but the reality of it is just a little extra stimuli can actually cause me to focus better. I'm not an expert on ADHD, so I'm not going to get into that. But at the same time, I have compassion and empathy for Tammy, because in that moment, she's trying to make sure that I learned the material, and that if I became a CSAT, that in some sense, her name was on it, and she wanted to make sure I was really good at what I do. And so there's this balance of seeing that we each experience the world a little bit differently. How do we interact with each other to where we can say to somebody, and I guess I should answer the question, right? Where we can start to ask them something along the lines of, no, wait, did we already ask? I'm jumping into the next question.
I'm going to read that one in a second. So,
how do we start to recognize that we need to get curious about how other people experience the world before we assume that the way that they're interacting with us has the intention that they mean it to have? Though it's annoying that I have to ask you to take the laundry downstairs, I also recognize that for some reason, that's not how you operate. So unfortunately, I need to get more literal and say, hey, is this what you're trying to send? Are you trying to tell me you don't care about me when you don't take the laundry downstairs? And they're like, no, not at all. Okay, can you do me a favor? Can you show me you love me by taking the laundry downstairs? That would mean a lot to me. And they're like, sure. Like, that's just weird to them. But Tammy has to get literal in order for them to take it down the stairs. Sorry, was that?
No, that is absolutely true. And, I have said, my husband never thanks me for unloading the dishwasher. I always thank him for unloading the dishwasher. And I was like, he saw it and he unloaded it, and it cost me nothing to say thank you. And I'm reinforcing good behavior. But on the flip side of it, like, I hate to vacuum, and he is very good about doing the vacuum. And because he does it all the time, that's just kind of his thing. So we've come up with, we've come up with skills for, like, you're just going to do this. Right. If you do this and I haven't asked, yay. Right. And then I'm not doing it all myself, so.
Oh, totally. So it's figuring out ways of, I keep saying this, like, figure out ways to ask questions and get curious about the cycles, these negative interactions that are going on with you and your partner. And if you can get curious, you'll likely find out more about why that pattern's behaving, why that pattern's happening. and then you guys can figure out ways to actually interrupt it. Because if you recognize that the pattern, these negative cycles are what the enemy is, the negative cycle is the enemy, not your partner. But we get into these weird spaces where we feel like it's our partner that's the enemy. And it's like, no, it's the negative patterns you guys are getting into. And it's hard to disrupt those if we don't know why they're even happening.
Well, and that leads to the next question. My husband and I seem to have a pattern. I will make a request. He will agree. Time will go by. Nothing will occur. I will ask again. He will tell me that I have to have everything in my timetable. Time will go by. And I finally get so upset that I become ridiculous, crying, telling him I'm hurt, etc. Then he honors my request, but it doesn't mean as much because of the rigmarole. For example, I asked him to write me a love letter, just a simple note, plan a weekend, etc. What should I do? And what I'm curious about with this is I will make a request, but in the request you have I would like, by Friday evening that you do this. Is there any kind of time, do you set that as part of your communication? So if you want to throw that in the chat or something, I'd like to know that too.
His comment is interesting. He will tell me that I have to have everything in my timetable. So it actually makes me wonder. Most often I'm just going to go with a betrayed partner here. I don't even know. We may not even be dealing with that, but like most likely the partner who's asking their husband is probably learned, fine, I won't give you a deadline. The problem with that is now it's wide open and you're sitting there with the anticipation of disappointment and frustration, right?
Yeah.
Because your need probably involves a timetable, but in an effort to avoid fights, you've withheld a timetable. So I don't know the truth here, but like you said, are you giving them a timetable by this time on Friday night? Can you do XYZ? And so I am curious, but that's a mistake that a partner will often make, is to withdraw a timetable to avoid conflict and to somehow make it better. It doesn't. In fact, the more specific we can get in our needs, the better, because, hey, can you by Friday evening, what was the example here? There wasn't one.
Write a love letter, a simple note, plan a weekend, etc. So.
Oh, okay. And so, hey, by this Friday evening, can you write me a love letter? The thing that I love about that is there's a very definitive, you were able to do this or no, you were not. And so I didn't get a love letter. And I hate how specific it needs to get. Will you write a love letter by Friday evening and give it to me by Saturday morning? Right? And have it on my bedside by Saturday morning, right? And I love it to be that specific, because when you wake up and it's not there, your disappointment, your sadness is completely legitimate. It wasn't less legitimate before, but because you were so specific in your need, if he agreed to do it and didn't get it, it's, hey, I'm disappointed. You agreed to do it, you didn't do it. Now I'm sad. And so I always encourage people, be as specific as possible. What I'm curious about here is I would go to him before you make another request. And once again, I watched the webinar with Matt and Tammy, and we were talking about patterns. And I am curious, when you say everything has to be in my timetable, that sounds to me like you feel a lot of pressure. Tell me more about where you felt pressure. Is it pressure to perform? Is it pressure to get things done right? Tell me more about, because he's actually being vulnerable, whether you believe it or not, and he's opening up to you about this wound he has around your timetable. And I would be curious to see if you could get him to tell you more about that. And he might try to make it about you. Well, yeah, you're so demanding. Okay. When else in your life have people been demanding? When else have you felt like things needed to be done according to a specific timetable, because I want to know why me having a timetable, if I even have one, is so, why is that so difficult or painful for you? Right? I mean, the reality of it is that time is a construct that we use because we need it, and so help me understand. I mean, do you have that same issue at work? You feel frustrated that it's on other people's timetable. My guess is, as I read this, my gracious assumption is he puts things off because he's easily distracted, or he puts it off because he wants to make sure he can do it just right. Because if I'm going to write a love letter, I need to make sure it's awesome. But he has so much fear about not being able to do it right that he never does it. And that's more painful than putting out, for you as a partner, that it would be more painful than just a really simple note. And so he's got all this pressure that he has to do it perfectly. He has to do it amazing. He's got to do it in such a way that you've never had as good of a love letter before. But because all of that pressure that he's putting on himself, he just never does it. And then he feels stupid. He feels bad about it. So then he blames you, which isn't healthy in any way. But I would want to dig into that and see if I could find if that could be what's going on for him.
Yeah, well, and she did add, yes, I'm the betrayed partner. Sometimes there is a timetable, other times not. It doesn't matter if I give him a timetable or not. He will just miss it. I have done both, and it seems like a power struggle that I don't want to have. And and I can only imagine, like you talk about, that you get so upset that you're crying and telling him you're hurt and
Yeah,
everything else, and how how he probably kind of shuts down or pushes back on you for that. And it is sad that fear, or fear of failure or whatever, it would be interesting to find out, keeps him from doing something very basic that would be so meaningful if he was willing to step into that space.
absolutely. So,
uh,
but I think what I love here is we talk about the power struggle, and what it is it's like, in that moment, I've been vulnerable and asked for a need. And if and think about it, if I say, hey, can you plan a weekend? That's a vulnerability because I'm asking for a need. So we have to recognize that what's coming up for us is rejection of our vulnerability. And that's really normal. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is start recognizing that every need you request is vulnerable, and that it's an opportunity for him to show up or not. Now, the question is, rather than taking it personal, which is what any of us would logically do, rather than taking it personal, start asking questions. Why does he not latch on to my vulnerability? Why does he not want to plan a weekend? What's going on for him? And I make it so simple. Why is this not happening? But then you want to try and take that curiosity to him. If you can take it to him without all of your judgment, without all of your hurt, which you're entitled to have, right? Please understand, I'm not telling you shouldn't feel it. I'm just saying that I'm worried you'll never get to what's actually going on if your vulnerability, your pain is coming up every time. But it takes so much emotional development to be able to be vulnerable and have somebody injure you, and for you to stay curious as to, interesting, I gave you an opportunity to show up. I gave you an opportunity to care about me, to meet my needs and build trust and build connection, and you didn't take it. Why not? Right? Instead of feeling the pain, which is what all of us would normally feel. So you're almost doing it outside of yourself, going, what's going on for this guy? He says he loves me. He says he cares about me. I actually believe he does, but he's not grabbing onto it. Well, then you're going to get into what are the underlying issues he's got going on. Now, may not get into them very easily. He may not be willing to give them up because he doesn't want to go there. It's painful. You think he wants to talk about how plan a weekend so that you can criticize me for being a failure and not doing it right, not picking the right restaurant, and not getting a good hotel or whatever it is, right? Now, even though you're like, but I would never do that. It doesn't matter whether you do it or not. These are his fears, his worries. These are the stories he tells himself in his head. And nobody said those are rational or healthy, but that's what's likely happening. And so if we can get curious and say, that's interesting. You thought I'd criticize you. That really surprises me, right? We're able to stand back and go, instead of getting defensive, I don't criticize you. Are you kidding me? What I do is I'd love it if you did anything. And really, by saying, I love it if you do anything, he's going, yep, you criticize me right there. You think I'm such a failure. I don't do anything and I can't do anything. And you aren't criticizing him, but that's how he's going to take it. Why? Because these are the negative patterns we get in. So I love this stuff. Hopefully this is helpful.
Yeah. And I often am talking to people that, things escalate. I said, then you're in this negative, you're in a dance, but it's the same dance steps, and you're not going anywhere, and it isn't a fun dance, if things escalate into a fight, nothing gets resolved. You just have another fight about it. And so it's the same patterns over and over again. So what you're inviting is disrupt the pattern, step back, be curious, and 100% owning that, yes, you're right. You are entitled to disappointment and sadness and all of those things, but ultimately disrupt the pattern, and see if then there's a shift, and maybe he can do one thing,
Right. It takes so much emotional development though, to be able to feel your pain and stay curious, right? Because if I feel pain, I usually our natural reaction is to respond. It's to react. It's to blow up. It's to cry. And I'm not suggesting that any of those are even bad. The problem is if my natural reaction is to get defensive or to cry, and again, crying's not bad, then I'm not going to be able to get to what's actually blocking him in this case. So I hate it because it feels like I'm putting the burden of this onto a betrayed partner, but I'm actually saying this could go for anybody, right? The person struggling with addiction has just as much responsibility to learn how to do this instead of staying out of going into a reactionary position. They need to learn to stay out, go, oh, that hurts. Let me figure out why they responded the way they did. It takes a lot of beautiful growth that you guys can do to do it. And you got to practice it. You got to screw it up.
Yeah, well, but otherwise we'll just keep repeating the same patterns over and over again, and and then feeling more hurt and feeling more distance and all of that. So I really do believe in disrupting. And if I hurt your feelings by calling accountability about multitasking, I apologize. But you're right, I did have a job to do. So, but
no,
yeah,
you actually. I remember
I never shamed you. That was never my intent.
No, I don't think you ever shamed me. I remember being annoyed, but I also knew it was your job. Because that's part of your role in that environment, is to make sure everybody's staying on task and paying attention and learning the material. Otherwise, what good is the certification? So
it's just letters behind your name. And unfortunately, there were people, not you, but there were people that were doing that, and I don't refer to them. So thank you for being, no, seriously, thank you for being a person who took this work seriously, that really cares about clients and people. And so I'm grateful for that. So
right. And so no, absolutely. I never, I brought it up because it's a good example of interaction occurring between two people who are both well-intentioned and neither person is wrong. To be honest, there were probably several of those times that by you doing it did bring me back on task. right? To say that the whole time I was never in La La Land would be impossible.
Correct. Yeah.
But the reality of it is, here's a situation where you have two people who are interacting, and it would be really easy for me to go, oh my gosh, Tammy's such a nag, right? Whereas the truth is, hey, you know what? I know what Tammy's doing. She's doing her job. She's really good at it. And I appreciate her for it, even if she doesn't really have the time to understand everybody's in particular issues, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, and it is, and and ultimately the goal was that I want people to do good work so that the people that are hurting get help, and so it was a certain set of skills. So me again, I can do it. I can separate my hurt self from my inquisitive self. Thank you. I'm going to try it. Awesome.
No,
I love it.
I seriously do too. But honestly, guys, throw out your questions. Let's jump in here.
Yeah, we got another 10 minutes. So yeah.
I actually just threw a question in the chat to see basically what other questions do you guys have, and am I hitting a good subject, right? Is this clicking for everybody? And so
and these are relationship conflict skills. I mean, like, this is difficult families, relationships, all of that. I mean, it still gets to be the negative patterns. And I've had a number of situations where I have to step back and go, what is it like? What? Because I'm feeling something. Why am I reacting? What is it? Am I taking it the correct way? What's going on for the other person? And if I'm curious, then I can disrupt the pattern and keep things from going sideways, so these are not just in your primary relationship.
Oh, absolutely not. I tell people, if you can learn how to do this, you'll transform every relationship you engage in, children, coworkers, friends, family, partner, because what you're learning to do is ask key questions, because you're stepping outside of what appears to be the conflict. And what appears to be the conflict is, you didn't do this thing I asked. But if we instead learn to say, hey, I was vulnerable and asked for a very particular need, and according to my judgment, you didn't do it, and it's painful, but I don't know why you didn't do it. Can you teach me your perspective and what your blocks were and what your barriers were? Because the story I tell myself is that I don't matter to you. What is your truth? If I matter to you, what might be preventing you from showing up for a need that I asked you for, right? If it's not about me not mattering, what is it? Now, the tough part is they've got to dive down to a deep part of themselves to figure it out, because they could very easily, with all that vulnerability, just be like, well, you're just too needy. And you have to be able to go, yeah, no, I know I'm needy, and that's a good thing. I'm grateful to have needs. And I actually thought it was pretty awesome to ask you to fulfill some of those needs for you. So like in your perfect relationship, would the other person not have needs? Right? What about somebody else not having needs would make you feel better? Right? And now my initial thought is, well, I would feel better. Again, they would have to be vulnerable to say this. It would feel really good for nobody to expect anything of me so that I didn't feel like a failure. And it's like, I can appreciate that. I don't know how realistic that is, right? What would it look like for you to explore how to not feel like a failure? Now, as a partner, I would not say this to my other partner, right? But as a clinician, my thought process is, what would it look like to you to not feel like a failure, whether or not you can meet somebody else's need, right? As a betrayed partner, or as a partner in general, I might try and say, well, that's interesting. So the perfect relationship is nobody has needs so that you don't feel like a failure. Man, that's kind of sad. It's sad that you're missing out on opportunities to connect It's sad that you're missing out on opportunities to show up for other people and and maybe even show them how much you love and care about them in a way of service because you're so afraid of being a failure. Well, that makes more sense.
Or I'm thinking too that it's somebody like in brokenness that was taught that they can't have needs. So so literally no one should have needs. And I have to be an island and be self-sufficient and everything else. There are lots of people who grew up in houses where there was an emotional bandwidth to support them having needs, even as a child. So having that, it could be coming from some place like that too. But again, really sad because we're supposed to connect. We're supposed to be,
right. Well, and how sad was it that you learned in childhood that you weren't allowed to have needs? And so you also learned that no one else is either, right? So how sad that you've never learned to have needs. And that's so true, usually in addiction. And that's why addiction becomes prevalent in their lives. I'm not allowed to have needs. I'll go find my way of dealing with it. So they develop some sort of behavior that feels amazing, such as alcoholism or whatever else. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm allowed to have needs. I'm not allowed to ask others to meet them. So I'm going to ask the bottle, or I'm going to ask the internet, or I'm going to ask whatever, right? I don't have to rely on another person. And so I don't want you to rely on me, even though I want a closer connection.
Yeah, and Dr. Ravi uses the come here, push away, come here, push
Right.
away. And it's so true. It's like, I want you close, but I don't really want you close, because that's terrifying too. And it's so well, it's problematic for the addict, but it's also so hurtful for partners that are, but you want me close, but but you're pushing me away, and like we get a little closer and then you push me away. So we don't have other questions, and we're just about out of time. So unless anybody else has a final thought, otherwise, Matt, great to see you. It was fun to surprise you today. So thanks everybody for joining.
Good to see you.
So good questions and comments from everybody. And Debbie McCrae will be on next week, and Matt will be here in 2 weeks. So all right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.